Hi everyone, this is Raina. So this video is for those people who are involved in a relationship where one of you is a Cancer and the other is a Sagittarius. Somebody requested this recently and I was like, oof, because this is a very odd couple. That doesn't mean it cannot work, but it means that these are two signs that are very different, and astrologically, they form an angle called an inconjunction, which means that they're 150 degrees apart. And I've heard different analogies to describe what an inconjunction is, but basically, how I do it is say it's like wearing a polka dotted top and a bottom that's striped. Now, some people might do that and pull it off, and those would be the types of Cancers and Sages that make it work because, you know, being more serious about it, it's not just about the sun signs. There are other factors that bring two people together and keep them together. So I would never write off a relationship because two sun signs are forming in conjunction. And by the way, this can also be for the moon signs. If one is, you could both have, it could be one Cancer, one Sag for the moon signs, or one Sun Cancer and one Moon Sagittarius. Not that it's going to be exactly the same dynamic with the Sun or the Moon, but similar enough to include them. So I did compile a list of some of the positive things that they might benefit from being together, and then some of the more challenging things that each one, I'm not going to pick on one of the signs. I think both of these signs can aggravate the other for sure. But there are some things that they might have well, I don't know, in common. That's another thing, is that they can have very little in common as well, because what you're looking at are two elements that just do not seem to mesh well. And in this case, Cancer is a water sign and Sag is fire. And some brilliant person, because I said water puts out fire, which means that the water sign, and Cancer is just one water sign, there's also Pisces and Scorpio. If they're dealing with a fire sign, be it Sag, be it Aries or Leo, the water sign can be like a wet blanket where they, there's just something about their behavior, their comments, their attitudes that is, it just seems to take the joy out of the fire sign. It doesn't mean that that person's trying to be malicious. It's just that the way that they're wired doesn't kind of like encourage that sense of optimism, joy, whatever that the fire sign person naturally possesses. And I think one reason why is because water sign people tend to be very cautious, emotional in nature. And even though Sagittarius is a very passionate sign, as all the fire signs are, it's not the same kind of thing as being emotional. But one of the things when I compiled my list is but okay, let me just say that water puts out fire, but somebody wrote me and they said that fire can create steam when it's mixed with water. So you could kind of throw it right back against Sag and say that they make water signs, steam up. And I think of, what came into my mind is that imagery of the mad, smiley with the steam coming out of his nose. That's maybe that's what water signs can get aggravated by this kind of behavior from fire signs. So the things that they have in common, both fire and water are passionate. I put passionate and emotional. The fire signs are passionate, which means it's usually about a cause, an idea, like animal rights or human rights or the environment, or, something that, rouses them to action, or just in ideas, dreams that they have. Fire signs tend to be very expansive and idealistic. Water signs are very emotional and sensitive. And so, emotions, the way to differentiate between emotions and passions are that emotions tend to be very personal to the individual. Passions are more universal, that you can share a passion for something, but your emotions, even though you may experience a similar emotion to somebody else, you have your own personal experiences that have informed these emotional responses that the other person might not have, but they might exhibit the same emotion, if you know what I mean. So there's a difference, but at least they have this. When you look at air signs, they're very analytical and intellectual, analytical. They're not like very emotive, the way a water sign person is, or feisty the way a fire sign is. They're kind of cool. Earth signs and air signs is kind of interesting how they have that similarity the way that fire and water do. And earth signs are very dry, they're just very grounded, and they tend not to get like too hot under the collar. They tend to keep a level head. They love being rational and things like that. So fire and water can be quite in their feelings, whether they're impersonal or personal. Both are intuitive. Water signs are naturally intuitive, just like that. Those psychic tendencies. They can come out in different ways, through dreams, through conscious visions, being very susceptible to hypnosis, impressionable, just naturally intuitive. Fire is, and especially Sag. Sag is a sage, so it's more visionary, and that is about kind of being prophetic. And whether or not the person actually has a vision, they have a love of religion. They have that is something that they honor. So it's kind of like very strong in the wisdom. Could be sage. The sage is wise, and so there are different types of intuitive gifts that they possess, but they both have them in their own way. Now, I put here that Sag can open up Cancer's world, and that can include adventure, being more adventurous, being willing to do new things, and just take chances in life. Cancers tend to be very cautious, very security minded, and yes, these are templates. You might say, I'm a Cancer, I'm very adventurous. Well, maybe you have inner planets in Gemini and you're a lot more, you're not as emotionally sensitive as some other Cancers, and so that means that you're less attached and you're more willing to do things. Gemini is very, can be very restless even. But Sag is the ruler of the ninth house, which can be long distance travel. And when you just look at the two houses that these two signs rule, Sag rules the ninth house, and Cancer rules the house of home and family, the fourth house. So, these are two different places, the home front and wide open spaces. So, Sagittarius can be a good influence on Cancer and say, hey, why don't you, why don't we live abroad for a year? Why don't we travel more and not be at home as much. Sag can also lighten up Cancer. Cancer can be quite serious. Now, Cancers can have a wonderful sense of humor. As a matter of fact, I don't know if I observed this myself or I read it somewhere. I think I was observing this, that there are a lot of comedians that are Cancers, because water signs can tune into human nature very well, and they can and they're also great mimics. They're very impressionable, so they can take on different mannerisms of people. It's like channeling somebody else, kind of. And, but having said that, even people who are comics, they often say that they can be sad in their everyday life. And Cancer is very emotional, but sentimental, thinking about the past. And anytime that you have somebody who is emotional, they tend to be empathic. So they tend to take on the emotions of others. And then that adds a whole new layer to, the emotional landscape. But also, Cancer's ruled by the moon. So Cancers can be kind of moody, sometimes, changeable in their emotions. And sometimes they get a little bit offended by teasing, and Sag can be quite insensitive. I'm a sun in Sagittarius. I should say, full disclosure here, so that if I'm favoring Sag too much. But that's why I'm saying these things. I think I'm being pretty honest about Sag. Is that sometimes Sagittarians can be too blunt, and Cancer might be a little bit offended, and they tend to be very self-protective. And so Sag can kind of, maybe through their own, not to say being too insensitive, but just kind of not taking life too seriously, that can rub off on Cancer and make them, have a little bit more fun with life, and not, lighten up a little bit. And in terms of what Cancer can do, I wrote this. I don't know if this is really true. I wrote that Cancer can tame Sagittarius. If you think of Sag is the centaur. I can never say that. Centaur, centaur, half man, half horse. And but that animal part of Sag can really be that sense of wanting freedom and galloping away. Actually, the horse is connected to Sag in general, the wild horse. And you think of that song by the Stones, Wild Horses. So Sag isn't always, big on commitment in terms of like just settling down right away. But Cancer is very good at nurturing people. So the Sag might enjoy being taken care of. Now, I'm thinking of a Cancerian woman with a Sagittarian man cooking, I was going to say something which sounds like from 1950s, that, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach, right? So anyway, that kind of thing. So that can be something that is very appealing to Sag, and makes them feel at home. And the same could apply if you have a Sagittarius woman and a Cancer man, where the Cancer man can be the cook. Maybe the Sag doesn't want to cook, the Sag woman, but the Cancerian man enjoys it. And so maybe they can, do what is best for them, or what they enjoy more. And they kind of like do that role switch. Now let's talk about what might be a little bit tricky. I've already kind of talked about some of them, but Cancer can be too clingy, too much like, where are you going? When are you coming back? And of course, I think those are important questions. But I don't think that Sag likes to hear that. Sag really wants this idea, maybe it's a fantasy, but this idea that they have free reign, that they don't have to answer to anybody, that they can be free to choose what they want to do when they want to do it. Now, again, I told you I'm a Sagittarius, and I do have a lot of earth in my particular chart, and maybe that makes me more willing to cooperate in that sense. But I do think that Sages can commit. I think that what they don't like is when somebody has expectations of them that are not necessarily how they feel about it. So Sagittarius tends to be free thinking, and Cancers tend to be very traditional. So Cancers are going to go with what has always been, and Sages are like pretty rebellious about that. And they're like, who says you have to always have the same friends, go out with the same friends? There's no reason why you can't have your friends, I can't have mine, and we go out separately sometimes. Maybe not all the times, but at least sometimes. And Cancer might balk at that and say, no, that's not what you do when you're with somebody. And be very clingy, want to always be with them. Cancer can be too emotional, where, they take offense at things. Like I said, Sages can be they might tease, they might be insensitive, and they're not trying to put the Cancer down, but they just are not thinking that what they're saying is that bad or anything like that. And the Cancer person is like everything is breaking their heart, everything is insulting them. Or just their mood changes. That might just be too much for Sag, who's happy-go-lucky, wants everything to be positive, and so on and so forth. Cancer can be too cautious, always second-guessing themselves or being afraid of the unknown, and Sages might get a little bit fed up with that and say, you can't, guarantee anything in life. You gotta take risks. And that could feel kind of threatening to Cancer, where they feel like, why are you trying to put our life in jeopardy here? You don't know that what you're doing. You want to quit your job when you have this job and it pays, a lot of money, and you don't even know if you're going to like this other thing. And that could really tick Sag off if Sag is unhappy doing something else, even if it makes more money. They may be like, I don't care, I have to be happy, that's the most important thing to me. Or I have to be free, this other job I can do on my own schedule. I have more autonomy with this job. This other job, I might make more money, but I feel like a cog in the wheel. I feel like a slave to the system. Sag can be afraid of commitment. I've already talked about this. I don't think that this is true ultimately, but maybe Sages take longer to get to that stage where where they're willing to be in a committed partnership, just because they like that feeling of having a choice and not having to just agree to something that they're not necessarily wanting to agree to, they're not sure about. Sag can be irresponsible. Irresponsible is a word that is a little bit arbitrary, because it depends on your definition of responsibility. I'm just thinking about my dynamics, and and how they've gone with people like a Cancer who tends to be, very paternal, authoritarian, even sometimes, that kind of parental roles. Cancer is the sign of the mother, so it has that nurturing quality, but also that parental quality that feels a little bit like you're their child, even if you are a partner. And that could be the dynamic that emerges with a fire sign like Sag and a Cancer, where they feel like the adult in the room and they feel like you're another one of their children because the I'm saying you, I'm talking about obviously if you're a Sag. The Sag is like a big kid at heart, and that's how fire signs are. And that can be exasperating to Cancers. And also, Cancer may think that somebody who quits a job because they're not happy is being irresponsible. So that's why I say it's arbitrary. It doesn't really, there's no real one definition of what is irresponsible. Sag can be too irreverent, meaning that Sag is, it's not that Sag can't take anything seriously, it's just that Sages love, you know, busting the sacred cows. This is kind of that rebellious nature that doesn't, that free thinking nature that doesn't believe that anything is off limits. There's kind of that outrageous quality. I think Richard Pryor was a Sag, if I'm not mistaken. I think he was. And, Richard Pryor was really I would call him a pioneer, and I'm not even that familiar with a lot of his work, but I know that he really dealt with social commentary, and I'm sure he wasn't the first, but he was one of the first to deal with these kinds of loaded issues like race and other types of, and I think he used profanity in his act, and that's kind of rebellious and things like that. But the idea of kind of like questioning authority, whereas Cancer believes in authority and is, again, that traditional versus more rebellious nature. So, yeah, so that's kind of what I think about these two signs. And so I hope that if you are in one of these partnerships, that it kind of, some of the things I said kind of rung a bell. But in any case, thanks for listening. And if you'd like a personal reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.